You're watching 12 WKRC TV, a new generation of news. 12 Newsmakers starts now.
Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. Public education, especially in inner-city urban districts, is a basic concern for Americans. Politicians, whether it is Mayor Lucan in the last levy campaign, Governor Taft with his fourth grade reading promise, or both presidential candidates who have taken to issuing dueling education proposals, all find public education a compelling issue. And the reason is simple. They know that their constituents, ordinary people, you and me, are concerned about the future of public education and the children we entrust to the schools. The evening newscasts in the daily newspapers are regularly filled with stories about a wide variety of education issues, from funding to proficiency test scores. Most stories add information incrementally. Only rarely does something just jump off the page. But Peter Bronson's column entitled "Aiken for Some Help" in the Cincinnati Enquirer forum section last Sunday forced me to rethink some assumptions. The column describes Aiken as existing in a parallel universe where nothing fits, where children are older than adults, where parents act like children, where progress sounds like failure anywhere else. Bronson cites a variety of statistics. In 1997, 650 ninth graders entered Aiken. That same year, only 80 seniors graduated. 2 years ago, the number of graduates grew to 117, and last year to 173. But Principal Tom Huggins estimates that, quote, 50% do not go home to the place that is listed where they are supposed to go, with a significant number having to cope with periodic homelessness. The column notes efforts by teachers, counselors, and programs delivered by the Hamilton County Family and Students First Council to provide students a safe haven and a chance for a productive life. He quotes the principal as saying, "I'd like to know they got to eat, sleep in a bed, and weren't thrown out. I don't care if it's a single parent. I just like to know they have just one consistent person, a parent, who cares about these kids in an appropriate way." This morning, we will devote all of Newsmakers to further exploring the complex reality of the many students and teachers and administrators at Aiken who are grappling with these issues every day. To do this, I am joined by three people. Peter Bronson is the associate editor of the Cincinnati Enquirer and the author of the article that sort of spurred this. Patricia Eber is the executive director of the Hamilton County Family and Children's First Council. This organization began in 1996 to develop more effective ways to deliver basic social services in area schools. And Debbie Ray, who is an art teacher at Aiken High School. Ms. Ray has taught in the Cincinnati Public Schools for 24 years and at Aiken High School in College Hill for the last 3 years. Welcome to Newsmakers, all of you.
Thank you.
Peter, the column, and I read a couple of sentences out of that and cited a couple of statistics. If you had to boil it down, what is it that you hoped people heard from your column, read in your column? What was the bottom line for you that you were trying to communicate?
There are severe problems in this school. As I've learned since then, and as I knew earlier, there are severe problems at other schools in Cincinnati Public Schools as well, same kinds of problems. One of the biggest problems, though, seems to be lack of care, concern, involvement, participation by a lot of parents who aren't adequately taking care of their children, and they send them to school unequipped to be educated. And what my hope is that this column, because it has provoked a lot of people to pay attention, maybe it will instigate that some of these families in the community will get involved and start paying attention to this problem.
Yeah, I want to be clear. When you say that there are problems, I mean, a lot of times, I won't say normally, a lot of times when we talk about schools, we're talking about how well is math taught or learned, how well is social studies or English or writing taught or learned. We're talking about a different set of problems here, right? Not that those are unimportant or unrelated, but
exactly.
Your focus is on a different set of problems.
Well, you know, as I learned from talking to these administrators, the yardsticks that we traditionally measure schools with don't even apply here in many cases. The principal said proficiency tests, you know, it's ludicrous for us to aim for advanced and qualifying scores on the state's proficiency test because so many kids can't even make it past their freshman year. What he thinks the yardstick should be is how many can you get through 4 years so that they leave school with a diploma. And that's an entirely different proficiency measure than what we're accustomed to in our suburban schools and the schools that I'm accustomed to.
And the ones that we like to print up those statistics in the newspaper or run on the evening news and say, this tells us the whole story. Debbie, you picked, I don't know when you picked up the column or picked up the Enquirer.
Sunday morning.
Sunday morning, good. Did this seem like reality at Aiken to you?
No, it's not. We deal with serious issues, and I understand that there's serious issues at Aiken.
These kinds of issues? Do you recognize these issues?
Yes, I recognize the issues. But as I teach on a daily basis, I understand and I realize that there's a whole nother world that also exists at Aiken High School, where we do have parents that care about our students, where students are trying to achieve, where teachers hold high expectations for students. So to take a broad brush and paint all the students with the same color of paint, being an art teacher, I can relate to that, was disturbing to me. Disturbing.
And let's be clear, disturbing. What was the reaction at school?
It was mixed. It depended on who you spoke to, okay? And some teachers saw it as a positive article that would incite some interest and discussion, and maybe some focus on the issues that Cincinnati public school teachers deal with as a whole, and public educators have to deal with as a whole. A lot of our staff was disturbed about the focus that it placed on Aiken specifically, thinking that some of these students would be labeled, you know, and some of our students feel the same way, you know, because of course not only the staff was upset, but a lot of the students were equally upset and felt they had been misrepresented.
Peter, what about this issue of, I think two things I'd like to go back to Peter on.
Yes.
Why Aiken? And what about the broad brush that you were saying about all students?
Well, let me start with the all students part. It's clear in the column that no, I'm not focusing on the positive things that happened at Aiken, although I did talk about the valedictorian who had maintained a 3.7 grade point average, although she had been homeless through most of her high school career. And I said that was pretty inspiring. And I also said that there are teachers and staff there who are working heart and soul every day, one child at a time, to try and fix these things. But this is like saying that you have a plane crash and you report how many people walked away. No, you don't. This is a plane crash of children's futures. And this eye-opening statistic that shocked me is that you have an 18% graduation rate. If you take the most favorable numbers of kids entering as freshmen and leaving as seniors, 18%. That is a shocker, and I think most of Cincinnati should be shocked by that, and you don't bring attention to a problem by glossing it over and pointing to the positive ones that have graduated. You don't say, well, 18% graduated and it was only 14% last year. What an improvement. We could do that, but it wouldn't do anything for Aiken. Why Aiken? That really is partly, I can credit Patty for part of that, because she came in with a group, including the Aiken principal, Tom Higgins, and they wanted to talk about their Children and Family First Council and what it's doing in certain schools, and Aiken is one of those schools where this is working. Mr. Higgins, during our interview at the Cincinnati Enquirer, said, really, nobody visits us. They don't know these problems are going on. I have nothing to hide. I would challenge anybody to come out there and see what we're dealing with on a daily basis. And I said, hey, I'll call your bluff. I'll come out tomorrow if you'll have me. And he said, fine, call me and come over. So I did, and that's how Aiken became the focus of this. It's really just representative of a bigger problem for one school.
Yeah, and I think that's, as a reporter, I know that all the time too. Sometimes there's bigger issues, but you gotta be concrete someplace. And it's not just about Aiken, it is about these larger issues. Patty, your program, Family and Students First.
Family and Children.
Pardon me, Family and Children First Council. Tell me a little bit about your program. Why does it exist? It's still relatively new, and what is it trying to do?
Okay, I'll give you the 2-minute version. The Family and Children First Council, for background, is a big organization with about 80 different child-serving systems and agencies. And the executive committee of my agency is the directors of all the big public and private child-serving systems. And about 4 years ago, we decided we wanted to see if we tried to pool a bunch of our resources and really work together and focus on a couple major issues. Could we make a difference? And we selected some issues like high school dropouts and suspensions and expulsions and et cetera, things that would be pretty
Pregnancy
typical.
rates.
Right, right.
Okay.
And abuse and neglect, things that would be pretty typical that are pretty serious issues for every community in the country, I would think. After a lot of research, we decided to do a school-based pilot program, and we selected 4 schools. Aiken is one. At the time that we started this program, which is now, we're now finishing our 3-year of this particular program, we'd started with a high school, a middle school, an elementary school, and a school district in the county.
Which is, I just want to make sure, to be specific, Norwood.
Norwood is the
you
county
were in multiple
district.
schools in Norwood.
And
Is
high
that
school,
correct?
elementary school, middle school in
Okay.
Norwood, and at Aiken High School, Gamble, which is now K through 8, and Schwab, which is now K through 8, but was originally a middle school.
Right.
In Cincinnati Public. And we've done a lot of research, and we have control schools as well, where we're comparing our results over a period of years to see if what we're doing will make a difference.
What are your results?
Okay.
Are you making a difference?
Do you want to hear what we're doing first, or the
Okay,
results?
no. Let me hear what you're doing first.
Okay,
I'm
because
sorry.
I do want to say that I think that what we are doing is very ambitious in scope. We are not trying to just bring, and there are many, many, many good programs in the schools, and I want to make that really clear. We certainly do not corner the market on programs in schools. However, because we are such a large organization, we have been able to do something that's very ambitious, and we have a coordinator in each school, and we bring in everything to these 4 pilot schools, from the typical things, the mental health services, the substance abuse services, the bereavement groups, the alcohol prevention services.
Let me stop you on that.
Okay.
Mental health services. I mean, you live in this world, and even teachers in the institutions live in this world, but the rest of us don't. What would be a mental health service? Concretely, how would a student experience that?
If the student is having a lot of problems, they would typically be sent to the mental health therapist in the school.
Okay.
And we pay for all these services. But the council, we contract with about 35 different agencies actually for all these different
So they could
things.
go for counseling to a trained professional.
Well, they would probably go for an assessment, and then the therapist would contact the child's parent, because ultimately you can't put a child into treatment without a child's parent's permission under any circumstances.
Right.
But assuming the parent agrees, and I have to say it's very, very, very rare that a parent ever says no. In my experience, my earlier life as a therapist in these schools, a parent almost never says no. So they would receive counseling, an assessment, some kind of therapy. Typically, because time is limited, we might refer them out if there was a place close by that could see them, but make sure that they continue along with that. So that would be the kind of, and there's huge demand for the mental health services in schools.
I'm going to switch off because I'm aware of need to move on here. Rather than ask you is it's effective, Debbie, you've been there 3 years. The program's been operating at Aiken for 3 years. Do you see an impact?
Yes, I do.
Is this effective for students?
It is effective for students. I've seen students who stay in school because of it.
Now, one of the things that Peter cited and I just brought up was there's an increase in graduation rate.
Yes.
Can that be attributed to the school, with the help of this program and maybe others, coping with these sorts of social issues as well as curriculum issues?
Yes, especially with Children and Family First. Especially since you've increased services to our school, it has helped kids stay in school and deal with the issues that they have to deal with outside of academic issues. It has been a positive force at Aiken High School, and I'm happy to hear that they're going to expand to elementary schools, because as a past elementary school teacher, I also saw problems that needed to be dealt with in a professional manner that their service could provide.
And anybody who knows teachers in the elementary schools, you know stories that even in kindergarten and first grade,
Yes.
there are children with serious issues that they need
Right.
to deal with. Peter, you talked about this as a parallel universe. And I suspect it's a parallel universe for middle class people, or people who are comfortable maybe, or something.
Right.
Just going to that school, going to Aiken, and it's just a case study in this case, situation, what was your personal sort of emotional experience? What did you come out of this, not just with ideas and numbers and all that? How do you come away from all of this?
Well, if I could be really candid, I left Aiken after spending a couple of hours with the nurse there, Carolyn Bloomfield, and Joan Pack Rowe, the Children and Family First, and the principal. And we talked, and they told me a lot of stories that opened my eyes, and I haven't led an especially sheltered life because I've been in this business for a long time, so I've covered all kinds of things. But I was pretty surprised, and I left Aiken and went to my daughter's softball game. And the contrast in schools was so dramatic. What it really brought home to me
Are we
is
talking a suburban school?
a suburban private school. The contrast was so huge, the gulf so wide, that it really brought home to me what we're having here, what we're going to have in this generation is an entirely different set of societies. There will be those who are successful, who are going to graduate and get scholarships and go to the best colleges and the best programs. And there are those who are having babies, and they're only babies. And the boys are dropping out before they even become sophomores. We don't have a Norwood General Motors plant anymore to provide jobs for these guys. Where are they going to go? I asked the principal, what happens to these kids? He said a lot of them would stay here as long as they could. We sometimes have to tell them when they get to be 19 and 20 and 21, you can't come back anymore. This is not your place anymore. You're not going to graduate. You're still in 9th grade. You're still in 10th grade. What are we going to do with these kids? And if we don't take care of them now, what's the future look like for all of our kids?
I have to take a break, and we're going to come back and talk about future and the role that schools might play in that in just a minute. Stay tuned. After the break, we will continue with this discussion. Welcome back. You know, Debbie, I used to be a teacher, and for about 10 years I would do North Central evaluations of schools for accreditation purposes. And one of the things I always did when I wanted to find out how a school really ran, I did two things. One, you talked to the secretaries
Yes.
to get the scoop on the administration. And two, I table hopped at lunch and talked to students and asked them who was the best teacher, who was the worst teacher, what was all that kind of stuff.
And they will tell you.
Oh, they absolutely will tell you because they're much more honest, and they know a lot more than the teachers and the administrators anyway. What about the students? Have you got any sort of concrete news from the students for Peter or for us?
Of course, I have a stack of letters here that their response to it, how they viewed it, the letter, and if you'd like me to read a little bit.
Just a little bit
just a tiny bit. The purpose of this article, Aiken for Help, was to show Aiken High School's need for social services, when in fact it does not associate itself with that at all. The statements made by you, referring to Mr. Bronson, and some of our other, quote, highly trusted school officials are very defaming to Aiken High School, and in most cases are not true. It's obvious that Aiken High is in need of social services, but we did not deserve to be demoralized as a whole because of our bad apples. And
I think that you're going to give Peter a lot of those articles.
I'm going to give them to him and let him peruse them. And maybe, hopefully what I would love to see is that you come back to Aiken and maybe address the AP class and talk about your point of view, your intent of the article. And I think that'll, with meeting you and having an opportunity to discuss issues with you would make them feel better about the article or make them see another point of view or your intent a little more.
Sure, I'd be glad to do that. Also, I have quite an inventory of those already.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do.
I had probably 100 or more calls from students, parents, administrators, people throughout the district. One thing curious about that is that the writer says they clearly understood the point of the article, but I didn't make the point, which to me is a contradiction. If I made the point about social services that came through clear enough to understand that was the point of the article,
I think that information was given to them later.
Well,
they had discussions about it in school.
Ah, I see. Well, I'm always concerned a little bit about responses that are steered in a group. It's like the people who come to me and say, I didn't read your column, but somebody told me about it. And then I always say, wait, time out. Go read it, and I wish you hadn't been told about it first because I'd like you to bring your own impressions, not what somebody else gives you.
A lot of the students came to school with the article and were upset about it. And
let me point out one other reaction that we had, though, which is that I had calls from administrators around the district who said, this is absolutely true. I admire Tom Higgins for having the courage to bring this up and say what he said so directly, because attention needs to be brought to bear on these problems. And you could substitute the names of several other schools in our district, and the story would be identical. Taft, Woodward, Hughes, Center. They said that they really admire him for stepping forward and bringing this to light.
Patty, we sort of got focused on mental health, but your programs are much broader. Can you give us a couple of other that are really concrete and you think are particularly effective?
Yeah, because I think people focus. Mental health is just one piece of it, but we're also trying to do a lot of prevention kind of things. We fund everything from which has not been as successful, by the way, after school recreation. We've had family fair. These are all the different schools. Family fairs, lots of different kinds of anger management programs, incentive programs for the kids. If they work after school, we give them certain money that they can use for class projects and field trips, and that actually has been very successful at Aiken. We've tried to do a lot of rewarding the kids that do positive things and helping the kids that have the most problems. But our biggest focus, frankly, is on prevention. And that word is very overused right now, but I can't say enough about it. And that means everything from helping train the teachers. We feel that this has to be a team effort. We cannot be social services down at the end of the hall.
It can't just be the counseling department dealing with one thing.
We can't do it because, and I feel really badly that the kids at Aiken feel like this is some kind of a slap in their face. But the fact is, because it's certainly not meant directed at them, the problems are, in our opinion, are so intense at every school, virtually every school in Cincinnati Public, and in every other inner city. Cincinnati should not be, singled out.
Yeah, we could go to Detroit or Chicago or New York or any place else.
Cincinnati is one of the better ones, and that is the truth.
Let's be real about this.
But the problems are so intense that there's not enough dollars in social services, and there are not enough of us to just continue to provide services. We've got to do something before these problems escalate to such a degree.
You were saying prevention, and if I understand correctly, you've gone through this 3-year sort of test cycle. You're going to be focusing more and more of your energy and dollars on elementary school or lower level schools, right? I don't know what the right term these days is.
Interestingly, and I think Aiken should be pleased to hear this, and I think it's a compliment to Aiken. We're going to continue in most of our same schools, not all for the next, because we're just getting the results of our evaluation, which have been pretty promising, and we're actually seeing some results at Aiken. But we're going to go into 4 new schools in the fall, and we're going to go only into elementary because we feel like in the long run, we'll get more bang for the buck kind of thing. We have a better chance of doing prevention kind of things in elementary schools. However, we have chosen to stay in Aiken, and we've only made a 3-year commitment. We did not have to stay there. We've chosen to stay in Aiken for another 3 years because there is such resilience there, because we have seen a lot of progress already, because we have a wonderful principal there, I might say, wonderful staff, and we're going to be there for another 3 years.
One of the things that we were talking during the break is this parallel universe sort of thing. Peter, how do we overcome any of that, or any of you? How does our society begin to help people who live in these different parts of our society actually know what others' lives are about?
Well, I think Patty's program is a good start. The principal had, a very interesting quote in our first meeting where he said, I asked him and another principal, what would you guys do if you could wave a magic wand and bring any amount of resources to bear on these issues and do one thing? What would it be? And he said, if I had my way, I would build a 300-bed dorm on the back of Aiken, and I would provide a place where these kids could live in an environment where they wouldn't be affected by all these outside problems of child abuse, sexual abuse, homelessness, crime, drugs, neglectful parents. And he would give them a place where they could get a warm bed and good meals and support.
Sort of that quote that Debbie, since you're here speaking for Aiken and some of the students, how do you feel about that, or would you add something else? We have less than 30 seconds.
How do I feel about that? I think my solution to the problem would be to involve the parents more. I don't think the parents understand, especially on a high school level, the input and the impact that they make on their child's education. That's where I would spend my energy, especially from elementary on. That's where I would put my emphasis.
The irony about that is institutions like the Children's Home of Cincinnati or Beach Acres no longer have any residential programs at all.
No.
And I, as a person who did the history of Children's Home, I find that very ironic given your comment. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank
Peter,
you,
go
Dan.
back and talk to Aiken.
I will.
And especially
Yes,
the
please.
students. And thanks for everybody for being honest.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. We end this morning not with words, but with photographs created by a Cincinnatian with a great heart and an amazing eye. For decades, Danny Ranselhoff lovingly documented the lives of the poorest in our midst. Danny's hope was that those of us who live comfortably might learn to look into their eyes.